Welcome to the Rabbit Hole Files. I'm Christy, and I'm here with my co-host Katie. Today, we're diving into a topic that's equal parts fascinating and a little creepy: children's imaginary friends. Are these invisible companions just a product of a child's imagination, or could there be something more to them? Kids all over the world throughout history have talked about having imaginary friends. Sometimes they're fun and harmless, but other times they can be strangely detailed or even unsettling. As parents, it can be tricky to figure out if these friends are just part of growing up or if there's something mysterious going on. So in this episode, we'll be looking at both sides of the story. We'll also be sharing some real-life experiences from friends and others who believe they've seen children interacting with something beyond the ordinary. So whether you're a skeptic, a believer, or just plain curious, stick around as we dig into the mystery of children's imaginary friends. Are they simply innocent creations, or could they be glimpses into another world? Let's find out. So I found just some different facts and comments that some psychologists had researched, and one of them was that in a study of 1,800 children, almost half of them between the ages of 5 and 12 had an imaginary friend. So 1 in 2 kids between 5 and 12 have an imaginary friend. 65% had one by age 7, but even teens admit to having them. The difference is that typical imaginary friends, the kids generally don't give them really detailed backstories. They are more of a playmate and they can kind of swap them around a little bit. But the ones that they seem to be a little more than that typically have distinct personalities, they have detailed histories, and they have connections to specific people or places.
When I talk to my 8-year-old Hadley, and she's playing with a friend, or she says she saw her friend, we just get to talking and she talks about what they talked about, and she'll bring up something about their family. So I ask, like, how's her mom? Or, where's her brother at? What's he doing? And she's like, I don't know. I didn't ask. So to have like all of the information about their past, kids aren't going to ask that because they don't ask their friends that, because that's not what interests them. I mean, maybe some kids do. My kids don't. And all the other kids I've come across that were in 2nd grade never asked all about their past and all of these different questions about their history, and just very descriptive.
And so it's like when you think about all of the instances that we talked about tonight, whether they're typical imaginary friends or unusual ones, they're all definitely unusual. They all have distinct personalities and histories and connections to places. The kids react to them, usually in negative ways. I really don't know. Talking about kids and them possibly seeing spirits just really freaks me out. I don't know what it is, but the concept of them being able to see something that I can't see and that they're talking to something that I can't see, I'm not about it. So luckily, I don't have kids, but I do want to know if you've ever experienced anything like this with your girls.
I don't really know why it's so creepy either. Maybe it's just because they don't really have any reason to lie about it, because why would they know to lie? So it's just so weird. But I haven't had any instances of it. One time we were in our bedroom and Lillian said, "There she is." She was kind of pointing in the corner, but there's a mirror facing that way also. So I'm not sure if she's talking about herself in the mirror or if it was something else. I don't know. Scared me either way.
Yeah, that's what I'd be like. Yeah, we don't talk to ourselves. Just cut it right off.
Right? We don't talk to the lady in the mirror.
So a little bit about me that I don't know if you knew. I was a psych major in college. So the whole concept of this is really interesting to me just from a psychological standpoint, because you think about all the scientific or psychological reasons that a child would have an imaginary friend, and there's a whole bunch of reasons why, but there are studies that have been done where the psychologist is talking to these kids, and the kids, when they know that their friend is just made up, they generally will tell the psychologist that they know that their friend isn't real. So there seems to be this line where you have your normal imaginary friend that is, the kids know that they're not real. And then you have these kids that have very descriptive, detailed experiences with something, whether it's a spirit or a ghost or a demon. I don't know. But like the ghost or spirit is interacting with them and telling them about themselves and giving them details. So it's hard for me to think that a child would lie about something like that. And not only that, when they're young, like 2 or 3, I just can't imagine them having the vocabulary or the intelligence at that age to be able to talk into that much detail or make something up in that much detail.
Yeah, I know. When I was researching it, I came across that also. I wasn't a psych major, but I did take a few of the classes, and they were always really interesting. And like that's kind of what I dove in on was the parapsychologist in the video we watched. And I kind of just dove into his history, some of the stuff he discovered, because it was just so fascinating.
That's awesome, because that was one of the things I didn't do. I'm glad that you looked into it, because it didn't even dawn on me to look into that guy.
I don't know why I was so obsessed with him.
Yeah.
I just saw him in the video and I was like, I have to Google him. And then I spent like 2 hours.
The fact that he kind of went at more of like a scientific angle was pretty cool. Some of the other things that I was looking into as far as like scientific psychological benefits of it, they talk about how some of these kids are going through like a transitional phase where maybe they're moving to a new home and a new place and they don't have many friends, or maybe a parent died or a grandparent died, or there's something going on within their household relationships that is making them create these imaginary friends to kind of have emotional regulation. So I can kind of like see that. But again, the child knows that it's not real. So they can just kind of like turn it off at any time. But then you have like all these examples that we're going to talk about later where it's very clear that these aren't made up beings, you know. Some of the other things that they talked about that I found were building social skills, like learning to mimic conversations that they're hearing with adults. That's why you tend to find them having a conversation and they're like developing conversational skills and practicing speech and things like that. So it's pretty interesting. Like there are scientific reasons why a child would have an imaginary friend, but then you start getting into all these other things and it's like you can just tell that that's not what's going on.
Yeah, when I was looking into why children have imaginary friends, the social skills came up. And like you said, it was talking about whether they have like difficulty with children their age. It's how they practice what they're going to say before they say it. And they can like run it by themselves and hone that skill. When it's not an imaginary friend and it's something else, they just they have the details where you, in the video we watched that we're going to talk about, you know, they can pull up those facts, and then they pulled up a picture of them and like he had already died, and she's like, what, 5? She pointed out to him and said, that's him.
So I have a bunch of clips that I took from various places. A lot of them are from that video that we watched. So first things first, though, if you were going about your day and all of a sudden Lillian walks in and she asks you if she can play with the old man in the backyard, what would your first thought be?
Absolutely not. Who is this man? Why is he in our backyard? And why does he want to play with my small child?
Yeah, so that was what cracked me up from the get-go with this movie, was that the mom instantly went into, this man is preying on my child, calls her husband, and her husband is like walking around with a gun trying to find this guy that her child wants to play with. That I felt like all of their reactions throughout the entire movie were realistic in my brain. They're trying to figure out what's going on. So the very first clip that I'm going to play is the mom explaining the very first time her daughter has an interaction with this spirit or her supposed imaginary friend.
As the weeks passed, Heidi mentioned the man several more times. His name was Mr. Gordy, she told her parents. He often came by to see her and they played. She described him as having grayish silver hair and wearing a dark suit. The Wyricks asked their neighbors if they knew a man who fit this description. None of them did.
So right off the bat, that would have freaked me out because she's so detailed in her description of him. You know, like, I don't know how old she is. I'm assuming she's like 4 or 5. So it just seems odd to me that she would make that up, let alone it being a man and an adult and not like a child. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like most imaginary friends that kids make up are either children or like some obviously weird creature that they invent in their mind.
Yeah, what gets me is at the end, the ominous, but no one knows.
So then, she's constantly playing with this guy, and you can tell that it freaks her mom out quite a bit, but that she starts to get used to it. And the whole time she's just kind of figuring like it's an imaginary friend or whatever. And the daughter, Heidi, she's like getting to the point where she's wanting her mom to make extra lunches so that she can like share it with Mr. Gordy and things like that. And her mom is just going along with it. But you can tell that things are starting to get a little more weird. So I have another clip here where Heidi is starting to see Mr. Gordy like all the time.
She talked about Mr. Gordy, I would say almost every day. Everything was Mr. Gordy this, Mr. Gordy that. I played with Mr. Gordy today.
So this is like an everyday thing all day long, it sounds like. Mr. Gordy is always there. And it just seems like imaginary friends with kids, they don't really do it all the time, like all day long, So that instantly made me start feeling like she's really seeing something. And I feel like the mom is starting to get to that point too. But it gets weird because she starts to see other spirits too. And I think that that's when it clicks with her mom that there's something else starting to go on here.
Yeah, with Mr. Gordy, he would be in the car when they're getting in the car, or she would, like in the video, it showed her talking to like a chair, and Mr. Gordy was in the chair. It would have her meals, the extra ones that would be sitting next to her but never touched. And then when she said that a man knocked on the door covered in blood is when things really escalated.
Yeah, and so when she said that there was another man, and I think his name was Khan is what she was calling him, I think that that's when it really freaked the mom out because, again, like, why would a child be talking about seeing a man covered in blood? Like, that is scary. So I just feel like they wouldn't invent scary friends. But it seems like now that she's starting to attract spirits toward her, maybe these more malevolent ones are starting to trickle in because later on she starts to see something inside the house and it doesn't appear to be Mr. Gordy and it doesn't appear to be Khan. I think at that point, that's when both parents, what do we do? I don't even know how to handle this.
Yeah, when she saw the other spirit that wasn't Khan. I agree. I think she was already letting Mr. Gordy in so she could feel all these other ones too that were there. And then she's able to identify Khan. She was able to identify him in a photo also.
Yeah, it gets so odd because some kind of management person that helped with Mr. Gordy's estate had the deed to their house that they just bought, and she brought it over and it clearly had his name somewhere on the paperwork, so that's where they kind of started tracking down more information. And Gordy isn't a common last name either, so it was just interesting that that was kind of the validation that they needed to realize that this actually is something, like they actually had physical proof versus just trying to rely on what their daughter is telling them. But if Lillian came up to you and she said, "Mom, do you promise not to get scared?" What would your reaction be? Like, what do you think she's about to do after that?
Oh no, I would let her talk, but if she said promise to not get scared, I'm gonna have to say no. Promise that, but you're gonna have to tell me anyway.
Right. So I think the part that scared me out was this.
Are you sure you won't be scared if I tell you this?
No, I won't be scared.
There's a man behind you.
Are you sure? Is he still there? Andy!
The very end of that is exactly what I would have done. And I can imagine you doing that.
Yeah, she'd be like, "There's a man behind you." I would just freeze.
You would start burning sage. That's what you would be doing.
I would be freaking out and be like, "Oh hell no!"
Right?
Packing up. We would be out so fast.
Seriously. And I feel like she's like a stay-at-home mom is the impression I'm getting too. And your only protection is your 5-year-old that's in your house with Huge. She's the one that's seeing these things that you can't see. Oh my God. So, and then it just keeps getting worse. If they start waking up with claw marks, really deep scratches to them. And it just seems all of these instances that I found that things start off innocent and then they always end up getting more and more malevolent or scary. So I don't know if these spirits would be trying to like mask, and like gain trust, and then they start to do these things. So Heidi, she wakes up with scratches on her face. She's sleeping with her parents. She doesn't want to sleep in her own bed. And by this time, I feel like the parents had the impression that something was really going on. So they're all sleeping together in the same bed. And then the dad wakes up one day with really deep claw marks. I believe they were on his back. And I feel like that was just kind of the final straw for the family. So I have their reaction here, which is what made me feel like, okay, I believe them.
He had him down his back, his legs. These were deep, long gashes. It went on for several nights. He said, if it happens again, he said, we're moving. We're going to leave everything in the house and they can have it all. We'll just move away and leave it all.
I just feel like they sound very sincere.
I think that's what sealed the deal for the parent.
Yeah, that's when they call in the researcher that you were talking about. So tell me what you found out about him.
Okay, I hope you're ready because I have his whole history.
Okay.
To start off, it is not about the parapsychologist, but this is just a fun fact about the haunting in Georgia that we're watching. This video inspired the movie The Haunting in Connecticut 2, Ghost of Georgia.
Doesn't that title crack you up though?
Yes.
I don't know why they thought that was a good movie title, but we'll go with it.
What cracked me up was just The Haunting in Connecticut 2, Ghost of Georgia. But you're in Connecticut.
I know.
I know, it's absolutely ridiculous. Okay, so this parapsychologist that the family calls in, his name is William G. Roll. He was born July 3rd in 1926 in Germany, and he died January 9th in 2012 here in America. So how he became a parapsychologist, his parents divorced when he was 3 and he moved to Copenhagen with his mother, and she unexpectedly died. Years after they moved there, I don't know the exact timeline, but when she died it was unexpected. So he began having out-of-body experiences, which some said were caused by the shock of her death. So he worked as a courier for the Danish resistance until his country's liberation when he was finally reunited with his father. So before that, during this resistance, he lived with a guardian, and this guardian gave him a book on poltergeists and paranormal activity, and that's how he really became interested in this stuff. So him and his father ended up in America. He enrolled at Berkeley, which is the University of California, and he studied psychology and sociology, but his main interest was parapsychology. So he joined the staff at the parapsychology lab at Duke University, and he eventually ended up being appointed professor.
It's interesting. You said it's at Duke University. They have a whole division for parapsychology.
Yeah, they had a whole division. The director of the parapsychology research lab is actually who invited him to join the staff there.
See, I think that's really neat because that goes hand in hand with the University of Virginia one that I found. So I'm interested in seeing what research studies that they have posted on their website. It seems very interesting to me because when I think of parapsychology, I always think of it being like a holistic medicine type of thing where it's not a real degree. But these are real researchers, real scientists in real divisions at real universities that are accredited, and they're grant funded. So they wouldn't get grants if there wasn't real research being done.
Yeah, they do have real research in all their accreditations. Dr. Roll ended up being appointed the professor of the psycho research and psychology at the West Georgia College, which is now the University of West Georgia. And he earned his doctorate for his thesis, This World or That, an examination of parapsychological findings and suggestive of the survival of human personality after death. So when he was at the lab at Duke, he and another researcher, his name was Gaither Pratt. So they were sent to do a poltergeist investigation. So they were assigned to visit the house of James and Lucille Herman in Seaford, Long Island in New York. So the couple called the police because porcelain figurines and other items began flying through the air and breaking against the wall. And it only happened when their 12-year-old son Jimmy was home. So they blamed him. But then they and police officers witnessed these objects flying too far away from Jimmy for him to have thrown them.
So they're in a room with him, and then way on the other side of the room, these things are being thrown around.
Yeah, like 4 feet from him. He can't reach these objects to throw them.
Yeah, nope.
Right? So what was really interesting about this is the couple were Catholic, and they put out bottles of holy water on the assumption that the disturbances were by an evil spirit. But when no one was in the room, they spilled with explosive sounds. So they attributed the occurrences not to noisy ghosts, which is the translation of poltergeist, which was a fun fact, but to involuntary and unconscious psychokinesis on the part of Jimmy, for which they coined the term recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis.
Wow, so they believe he was doing it with his own brain. So that probably led them down a whole rabbit hole in itself, researching kinetic abilities.
Oh boy, did it, because I went down that road too. So the recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis is also called RSPK. And that theory, which he talks about in the video, and those emotional impacts and picking up on that energy, the theory is how Puthoff had theorized that gravity and inertia may not affect an object if an RSPK agent can affect 0-point energy. So it is a sea of random electromagnetic fluctuations throughout space.
So Hal Puthoff that you just mentioned is also very involved in the UFO community, but 0-point energy kind of goes hand in hand with how they feel that UFOs propel themselves too, with no visible engines, propellant, things like that. It's like he's insinuating that we have that ability to create that within our brain.
Yeah, it is absolutely fascinating. I won't go much further into Dr. Roll's research, but there were several cases done where objects were flying off of the shelf, and in one of them they did a psychological test on the guy who was always around when it was happening, and it turns out he held like resentment towards his employers, so he was using that RSPK involuntarily, and items were like flying off of the shelf and breaking.
That's really, really neat. I'm gonna have to look more into this later.
Yeah, so part of Dr. Roll, when he comes in the video, he starts talking about the increased electromagnetic frequencies and how people leave emotional imprints even after they're gone. So I dug into the theory of emotional imprints, and the theory goes that the emotional impact and sometimes even the imagery from the event literally imprint on the physical space and atmosphere. Future persons who visit the imprint and react to it, whether it be deeply affected or merely uncomfortable, almost everyone has some kind of reaction to these places. Then that feeds even more energy into it. Human-like images can be a part of these illusions, adding to the dramatic of it when you find one. So shadows is one, something there out of the corner of your eye, while emotions that aren't yours flow. But these images aren't earthbound or alive, they're just echoes, and it's people's energy feeding into these events, or people who are sensitive to it. So he talks about how people are more sensitive to the electromagnetic frequencies, pick up on these imprints, and that's probably how Heidi experienced these spirits. We were talking about Mr. Gordy, and then they increasingly got worse, so she was probably, all this energy she was putting into Mr. Gordy and seeing him fed into these other emotional imprints left. Traumatic events, and that's why they were more malicious.
That's very interesting. The only thing that threw me off with him, the researcher, was that when he was saying all this, in my head I'm thinking she's having conversations with Mr. Gordy, and Mr. Gordy's talking back. When he talks about them basically being like illusions or a rewind play over and over, that it just doesn't go hand in hand with that sometimes. And then you also have the physical injuries too. So it seems like whatever whatever this is also capable of hurting people if it wants to.
I absolutely have no idea how to explain the physical marks left.
Yeah, and
They were claw marks. They weren't like nail marks. Like, it couldn't have been the RSPK where she's not actually using, she's using the 0 point energy. So her hand's moving, but she's not, like, her muscles aren't physically moving it kind of thing. But it wasn't her nail marks.
yeah, and to have it affect them in such a way that they basically wanted to get the hell out of there. They were ready to just leave every single thing that they owned in that house and move before they started bringing in people to try to help cleanse their house.
I absolutely would have been out faster than they were. They really stuck in there for a while before they got help, and I could not believe it.
I don't know. When I found that video, I felt like it was probably the most credible one that I've ever seen, where I watch it and I'm not rolling my eyes. Like, I really believe what they're saying, especially the mom. The mom sounds extremely genuine.
She sounded terrified. She sounded like these were real experiences happening to her. And even the daughter, it had her, like, when she's older, talking about this. And, she was made fun of in school, in the neighborhood, and all of this stuff. But she still insisted she saw this. She didn't change her story or anything like that.
So when I watched this, I went down this whole rabbit hole of all these other things because I feel like a lot of these topics are kind of interconnected. It's a giant web. So you have your imaginary friends who could be spirits, and then you also have the kids that see these spirits, and the adults think that they see an imaginary friend, but they're interacting with a spirit that must have been connected to them from like a former life. And so I found some really interesting firsthand experiences that deal with that, and that's where I start to get really weirded out because I just can't imagine a 3-year-old having the detail to talk to their grandmother about their past mother. That just seems like that would never be a topic of conversation between a 3-year-old and an adult.
I read about this too, and I was just telling Chase this morning on our drive into town about how this happens.
Yeah, so let me play this clip. This is the grandmother who is out in their backyard playing with her granddaughter, and she notices her granddaughter is talking to a tree. Innocent enough, it becomes a lot less innocent later on.
Nothing very unusual happened with Willa until she was about 2 or 3 years old. I took her to the local park. Lots of kids playing, lots of people around. It's a late spring day. I was just sitting not too far from her, watching her, and she was standing looking at a tree. It was a fairly good-sized tree, and there was a limb that came sort of out from the side where somebody could reasonably be sitting. And then I could see that she was talking to the tree. And my first thought was, isn't that sweet? She loves the tree. She's talking to trees. When we got back from the park, she was drawing with chalk in the driveway, and she said, "I'm going to draw you my other mother." I didn't want to frighten her, and I said, "Well, tell me about your other mother." And she said, "Well, she was up in the tree." I said, "Why was she in the tree?" And she said, "Well, she only had one leg. She was bit by a snake, and a bad doctor tried to save her, and he cut off her leg, but she still died anyway." And she said, "Get me down, help me down." And I told her, "Can't you see I'm little now? I can't help you down." And she told this woman, her other mother, she said, "I have to go now. I have a new mother." And she walked away.
So what is your first impression hearing that?
Terrified.
So we have a 3-year-old that sees what she believes is her past life mother in a tree, and she's capable of telling her grandmother this. And not only that, her grandmother hears her, or she's told later on by the little girl that the little girl told her past life mom that she can't help her out of the tree because she's little now. Can't you see that I'm little? It's like she has this connection of, yes, I used to be big, but now I'm not.
I went to that link you sent me and read some of the research that they're doing of children remembering their past lives and how it starts at 3 and it almost goes all the way away at 7. And it would talk about how parents know, or their toddlers, whoever would be saying that, they have a different mommy and daddy, or what their career was, or what they drove. And it was just so specific that like a 3-year-old wouldn't know that.
Exactly. So Willa doesn't fade out with ghosts. She continues to see them as she gets older. So here I think she's maybe like 7 or 8, and she sees more ghosts in her house.
And then when Willa got older, she came to my husband and I and told us that she was seeing things. She told me that these two little girls, literally, who were ghosts, were actually playing, going boom.
So Willa tells her grandparents and her parents that she's getting really upset and she's crying a lot at night because every time she tries to go out of her bedroom, these two ghosts intentionally scare her by startle her.
Yes. No.
But wait, there's more. You know, a lot of the things that I read as well were that kids get older. It's almost like amnesia kicks in, that there's a certain point of time where they don't remember any of this or interact with anything like this. But Willa, on the other hand, as she gets older, she starts to have more memories. Basically, this past life that she, initially talked about with her grandmother when she was 2 or 3.
My name is Willa, and I'm 18 years old. I first started having memories of the orphan train when I was quite young. I do remember having the same dream over and over of the little boy. I'd remember me being a little girl in the dress. I'd remember getting off the train and seeing him taken away to another family. And I remember my family, and I even started remembering my name. I believe my name was Anna.
She's 18 years old and she still remembers all of this.
And starts remembering more.
So in the video, her parents take her to a museum somewhere that is specifically for these orphan trains that she's talking about. She meets with the curator there to try to figure out if they can find the name Anna in any of their records. And there are kids named Anna. It's a pretty common name. By the end of it, nothing really clicks with her, but everything else, all of the photos, all of the history behind it, she remembers it clear as day.
Like it happened to her.
So it's interesting to me that not only does she remember this past life, but she's also seeing spirits that are completely unconnected to anything that could have been former life, right? She's just seeing spirits.
Yeah, so not only does she remember her past life, she's like a physical medium too.
Yes.
That's a lot to have to go through.
Yes. So that's just one account. I found another account that is even more interesting and terrifying because a lot of the ones that I found before this, they were, nice, happy stories, like Mr. Gordy. And then, like I said, things get really scary the longer that things go on. And this is going to be one of those where as the girl gets older, things get even more terrifying. This here is going to be the first time that the girl tells her mom that she's seeing things.
One time I was buckling her sister in the truck. We were gonna go to my mother's house and she starts talking and I asked her who she was talking to and she pointed to our neighbor's yard. She said the little boy right there. I was like, what little boy? She said him, he's too like me. I didn't think much of it because most kids have imaginary friends. I asked her if she had ever seen him before and she said yes. He follows her everywhere.
Not only is this kid not confined to, a physical place.
He moves. So time goes on and she starts to see other things.
She started looking out windows and saying, oh no, they're coming.
So if I heard my daughter say something like that, I don't know what I would do. I would probably be spraying the house down with holy water through a power washer.
Anything I can get my hands on. It's going in my house. It's going on my house. It's going around my house.
Yeah, so it gets worse.
And then just one day, out of the blue, she said, oh no, they're here. They're finally here. So we all just stopped immediately. Of course, I look out the door now and I said, there's no one here, sweetheart. And she said, yes, there is. She turned and looked at my daughter, Brooklyn. She says, and they want to hurt you.
And they want to hurt you.
I know.
Why would a 3-year-old make that up?
Right? That is a crazy thing for a 3-year-old to just imagine.
Right. And she's not letting it go. These are all things that are happening apart from each other, not just one right after the other. So she keeps coming back saying that she's seeing these things, that they're coming. And I believe when she told them that, oh no, they're coming, that she did that on multiple instances. And so they were finally just kind of like, whatever. She just keeps, saying that. And then she says they're here and they want to hurt you.
I did not like that.
So it gets worse. Ready?
We were in the backyard playing one afternoon, and there were several of us out there. Lexi's playing in the dirt, and she gets up and walks over to the tree line, and she's standing there talking. I said, "Who are you talking to?" And she goes, "To those people. There are 2 of them. What do they look like?" And she turned around, looked at me, and she goes, "They're on fire."
No, thanks. Gotta take the little one back to where she came from.
Ooh, that's what got me too. She was like, "And they're on fire." I'm like, oh no.
Yeah. So it's completely clear that this is really happening to these kids. They're really experiencing something. And the thing that I find interesting is that there seems to be all kinds of different entities that they experience. A lot of times they're experiencing like what they believe is like a human spirit. But Heidi, in the very first one, she was experiencing 2 humans, a shadow figure, and Willa was experiencing human figures, some from a past life. And now Lexi is seeing human spirits, but they're appearing to her as if they're on fire. So it's interesting to me that there's no rhyme or reason to how they're manifesting for these kids.
It's all different for all of them. I know.
Why do you think that is? Do you think that the shadow and these 2 that are on fire, do you think that maybe they're the not so good spirits, that they are tricksters in a sense?
Yeah, those are no Mr. Gordy. Those are the mean ones.
Yeah, I find it really fascinating that the way that they manifest in all these different stories that I found, that, I mean, the one manifested without her leg. She didn't have it in real life. And that kind of sucks that she died and maintained not having a leg in the afterlife.
Right. All of that, and you don't get your other leg.
Right. I mean, like, when I die, I want to be like 30 years old and have abs and be healthy again. But maybe I'm just going to be on fire with one leg. Who knows? So,
right, looking your best. That's what I want my afterlife to be.
So after all of that, the grandma reacts, and I am 100% on board with how she reacts here.
I was trying to ask her more questions about them. I said, "Do you know who they are?" She goes, "They are a mommy and a daddy." It's one thing to have an imaginary friend. She says she sees it. She's not old enough to lie to me yet. How in the world is this baby going to come up with seeing people who aren't there?
100%. I feel that exactly.
Lillian is 3. There's no way she would come up with this elaborate story of a mommy and a daddy, like, showing up to her on her own without it actually happening to her.
Exactly. It is terrifying. So we're talking about the way that these things manifest. And I found 2 really short experiences that some people posted online, and they gave me goosebumps. So this one is from Stardust and Lust on Reddit, and they said, "When I was little, I claimed to have an imaginary friend who had light brown hair and wore a nightgown, and she had stars for eyes." So it looks fairly human, but has stars for eyes, which is really terrifying.
Like the elves in Lord of the Rings. In the books, not the movie.
So she goes on and she says, "Well, my niece was living at my old childhood home, and she told me that she has a friend who misses me and asked me why I went away. When I asked who, she described my old imaginary friend."
What?
Yeah. Stars for eyes. If she used that in her description to her aunt or uncle, whoever this was, there's no way that you can like say that she didn't really see that. I'm sure nobody else knew that this supposed imaginary friend had stars for eyes. And why would they bother talking about it after so long?
I was just about to say, why would they keep talking about this like random imaginary friend that she had for a little while?
Right. And why would you talk about it with a niece or a nephew who's very young? You know, you would just scare them. So again, like, it's manifesting with basically a human form, but they're saying that it has stars for eyes. So you have burning spirits, you have shadow spirits, and you have ones that can manifest with stars for eyes. So then I found another one where this guy, his name was Rook_45 on Reddit, and he said, a kid said he didn't want to go to church because, and this is quoted, "my invisible friend says he can't follow me in there."
Why can't your invisible friend follow you in there, bud?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh.
What if...
Did not question his invisible friend on why not?
I don't think I would want to know, to be honest.
I think my first question would be like, why?
Yeah, and then their voice would probably drop like 3 octaves and they would start screeching or something.
I probably wouldn't like it, but that would be my instant reaction.
All of these stories so far, every single one of them started to get to the point where like it was actually terrifying or creepy. Something was happening physically, things like that. So it almost makes you wonder, are all of them, even Mr. Gordy, are all of them like malevolent spirits that kind of prey on small children and their ability to still have that connection with the spirit world? Because you think of like, you know, the Bible talks about fallen angels and basically what demons are supposed to be now. So these demons, they'll never walk the earth in human form ever. You know, they're doomed to always be what they are. And it almost feels like they have the ability to trick these children by taking on these different forms and then having the ability to invoke fear and terrorize them and scare them and do physical things to them. And I feel if evil energy does exist, that would be almost like a food source in a sense.
That is very interesting. I never thought about that. Well, I mean, I didn't really grow up in a religious family, so I don't really know a whole lot about the Bible. Nobody come at me. So that's really interesting to learn about the fallen angels and not being able to take on a human form and them using the fear of the children and whatever energy the children are putting into, see, even if it's just not scared talking to them, feeding into that they're real, they're there, giving them more power.
Exactly. And for whatever reason, we find out that what happens to us when we die is kind of a combination of a lot of different religions. In Christianity, when we die, we assume we go to heaven. Is it Hinduism? Talk about reincarnation, a whole bunch of different things that can happen when we die. But what if it's like a combination of all that? So because we weren't cast out of whatever the place is that we go when we die, we're capable of basically like cycling back in to a human form, reincarnation. But then you have these spirits that were cast out that don't have the luxury of having a physical form anymore like we do. And it's almost like this jealousy in a sense.
Ho ho, we should get paid the big bucks here. When I was reading about the children remembering past lives, it was talking about how like that's almost scientific evidence that reincarnation is a thing and they're cycling through because they can remember their past life and have like birthmarks or some sort of defect where they were injured and like that's what caused their death.
It just feels like it's all connected into like this very complex thing that happens when we die. It's so fascinating though. Like it almost makes me want to ask my 2-year-old nephew just weird questions just to see if he has answers to them. Because he's verbal, he's able to make some short sentences now. So if you ask the question, well, they have an answer.
Yeah, when I was reading about that, I actually like thought about Lillian and her talking and just like her normal jabber, and I'm like, none of that's been significant.
Yeah.
I don't think this is happening to her because she doesn't have anything descriptive or significant.
It just feels like out of everything I read or listened to, everything tends to end up back to more of a negative place. And so it just always makes me feel like now I understand why people don't want anything to do with Ouija boards.
Yeah, I don't bring that bad juju into my life. People did the Bloody Mary thing in the mirror. I was out before it started.
I believe it.
I don't want, even if it's not a real thing, I don't care. I'm not taking my chances. That's how bad things happen to you. I'm not letting any of that in.
Well, so here's something else that's interesting. So all of the past life in Spirit Talk, I came across this nurse that put out a book. She's a hospice nurse, and her whole book is about her experiences where her patients see loved ones come back to like receive them into death, and talking to them and seeing them and laughing with them and sharing stories with them, things like that. And the interesting thing in her book is that she says that 90% of her patients in hospice have these experiences. It's so common that it doesn't even get noticed half the time, or it's just expected, so it doesn't startle them.
Interesting. I wonder if like a lot of people attributed Alzheimer's dementia, because I worked in a Alzheimer's dementia unit at a nursing home as a CNA, and we had a lot of people that would like talk about their parents like they were there they left and ask where their parents went. So we just told them that they were a little kid again, and like their parents, they felt their parents there, and like would talk to their parents, and then parents just be gone, and they would freak out as to why they're gone and they're with us. So we usually just said, you know, your parents left you with us while they ran some errands.
The thing that's interesting in the book is that she would have downtime to where she would just be sitting with her patients doing charting, and the patient would turn to her and say, my husband's here. He says that we're going to go home soon. And the next day they would be gone.
Oh, wow. In the medical, you don't really have that much one-on-one time unless you're like a specific nurse like that. So you don't have a lot of time, you know, to just sit there and be there for those moments. But that's really interesting.
So don't you find it interesting that these super young children have experiences, and then your super elderly or sick people who are on their deathbed also see spirits? So your entry into life and your exit to life are very oriented around having experiences with entities or spirits or past family members coming to greet you.
Yeah, it's almost like, you know, there's like not a physical barrier because we can't see it, but like some kind of barrier in between when you're really young or you're old or sick or vulnerable that like thins, and you know, you can actually see and hear these people.
And you know, we talk about the younger ones having all these negative experiences. It seems like these hospice patients have calming, comforting experiences. So going back to that whole theory of these entities that these young children are seeing are actually malevolent, bad spirits that can't take on a human form. They will never be able to have a physical body. And so they torment these young children who are just coming out of whatever this spiritual realm was into their physical form. But then you get to your end of life scenario where you start to have visitations from people that you love that have gone before you. And it's a very good experience because you're about to leave your physical form and you're going back into your spiritual form. And it's almost like these malevolent entities just don't care about that part. They just want the physical body.
Yes, it is all coming full circle.
So that is about all that I got out of all of this is that we're never going to know until we die. But it just seems like there's just such a web of interconnected things that we can't see. And I could go on and on about other things like DMT, psychedelic experiences that people have and the entities that they see and just all of that stuff. But I think that this was a pretty interesting topic just to go down that rabbit hole of imaginary friends. And then you get into this whole thing of past lives, premonitions or memories or evil spirits or good spirits, like all these things that these kids are encountering that they seem to have amnesia and forget about after like 5 years old or 7 years old. I find it almost comforting to know that there has to be something else, that we're not just sludge that grew arms and legs and then we're just going to die eventually, you know, that there's actually a higher purpose of some sort or something outside of everything that we're experiencing on a day-to-day basis. As we wrap up today's episode, let's remember the importance of listening to and validating the experiences of children. Their imaginations and unique perspectives can offer us some profound insights into their inner worlds. Whether these imaginary friends are a product of creativity, a coping mechanism, or something else, they play a significant role in the developmental journey of many children. We hope that this episode has sparked your curiosity and perhaps even encouraged you to look at the world through the eyes of a child. If you have any stories, experiences, or thoughts about this topic, we would love to hear from you. Please share them with us on our social media channels. Stay tuned for our next episode where we'll continue to explore the mysteries that make our world so endlessly fascinating. Until then, keep wondering, keep questioning, and keep an open mind. Thanks for listening.